You have joined us for the November Transportation Planning Board meeting, scheduled for noon. 2 quick reminders. Please mute your mics when not speaking to reduce any background noise. And this meeting is being recorded for note-taking purposes, and we are also streaming to the public via our YouTube channel. And with that, I'll pass it along to our chair to get our meeting officially started.
Thank you. Good afternoon, all. I'm Kelly Russell, your chair of the Transportation Planning Board, and I call today's November 18th, 2020 TPB meeting to order. As you'll recall, in addition to live audio streaming, this virtual meeting is being streamed on YouTube. The broadcast on YouTube is another way to reach out to this audience with this virtual meeting. While you're all familiar with our processes for these virtual meetings, for the benefit of those watching us online, I'll briefly review the procedures we'll be following during this virtual meeting. First, I will ask Lynn to take a roll call of members or alternates to document your presence at this meeting and determine that we have a quorum. During the meeting, I will have the presenter complete their briefing, then invite questions from members in turn by jurisdiction. For the action items on the agenda, once the presenter has completed the briefing, I will invite one of you to make a motion to adopt the resolution, followed by a second of the motion made, and then I will invite questions from members in turn by jurisdiction. I will end by calling for a vote. I will ask only for nays or abstentions by jurisdiction. The rest of the votes from those present will be taken as yay votes. Lastly, a friendly reminder to mute your microphones at all times that you are not speaking, and importantly, to unmute your mic and state your name and jurisdiction when you do wish to speak. So, Lynn, I think we are ready for roll call.
Great, thank you, Chair. So I'm going to announce your jurisdiction, and if you could state your name, we'll record your presence. And if we miss you, or you're slow to unmute, or more appropriately, I'm too fast for you, that's totally fine. We're monitoring our participant list, and you can always send me an email, or we should be able to catch you. So let's start with the District of Columbia. District Council Phil Mendelson. District Council Charles Allen. District Council Brandon Todd.
Present.
Dolly. District Department of Transportation. District Office of Planning.
Kristen Calkins for Andrew Trueblood.
Thanks. On to the state of Maryland. City of Bowie. Charles County. College Park.
Good afternoon. Councilmember Denise Mitchell, alternate.
Thanks. Frederick County. City of Frederick, I've got Miss Russell. City of Gaithersburg.
Neil Harris is present.
Great. City of Greenbelt.
Hey, good afternoon. Emmett Jordan, Mayor Pro Tem, City of Greenbelt.
Thanks. City of Laurel. Montgomery County.
Evan Glass is here.
Great.
Gary Ehrenrich is here for Chris Conklin.
Great. Prince George's County.
Terry Bellamy.
Hi. Okay. County Council Member Denny Tavares.
Great. Thanks.
And Vic Weisberg, the alternate, is also here. Just as well.
We've got you, Vic. Great. City of Rockville.
Hi, everybody. Bridget Newton's here.
Thanks. Tacoma Park.
Hi, everyone. Casey Kostick.
Maryland Department of Transportation.
Hello, everyone. Earl Lewis is here with MDOT.
Thanks. Maryland House. And Maryland Senate is a vacancy, so we'll move on to Virginia. City of Alexandria.
Trying to unmute Canada's here.
Gotcha. Arlington County.
Crispin Dorsey is present.
Thanks. City of Fairfax.
David Meyer is present.
Fairfax County.
Walter Alquin is here.
James Walkinshaw here.
Got you both. Thank you. Falls Church. We'll keep an eye out for him. He usually shows up later. Fauquier County. Loudoun County.
Kristen Umstad is here.
Bob Brown, Loudoun County is here.
Thanks. City of Manassas.
Pam Sebeski is here.
Thanks. City of Manassas Park. Prince William County.
Ann Wheeler is here.
Victor Angry is here.
Thanks. Virginia Department of Transportation.
Maria Steiner is here.
And then
I believe Norman Whitaker is also on.
Okay, great. Thanks, Maria. Virginia House and Senate are actually vacancies, so we'll move on to WMATA.
Mark Phillips, alternate.
Mark. And now our ex officio non-voting members, Federal Highway Administration.
Sandra Jackson's here.
Hi, Sandra. Federal Transit Administration.
Anna Koenig with Federal Transit Administration.
Thank you. National Capital Planning Commission. Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority. And National Park Service. Okay, great. That concludes the roll call. We have a quorum. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Lynn. I did just note there are a couple of folks in the chat that we missed on the roll call, and you'll get those, right? Okay, I do understand also we have 2 sets of public comments. Can you summarize those for us, Lynn?
We do. Thank you very much. We received 2. Both are posted on our meeting page, so I'll take a minute to summarize them. The first is from Peter James, who offers planning and consulting services, and he provides information in his comment to support he and his company's proposal that autonomous guideways is the solution to metro area transit. The second comment is a letter from the Coalition for Smarter Growth regarding items 10 and 11 on today's agenda on the Visualize 2045 technical input solicitation and performance measures. So I'm forwarding those comments to our long range plan team as we move to finalize the document for board approval next month. In summary, the Coalition for Smarter Growth commends the TPB for adding questions to the technical input solicitation regarding support for regional goals on equity, activity centers, and greenhouse gases. They ask that TPB further strengthens the solicitation with questions that they provided on TPB COG priorities, and that the priorities from the Long Range Plan Task Force are more directly tied in. And lastly, that the RTPP, which is our Regional Transportation Priorities Plan, our RTPP goals are better incorporated into the plan performance measures. So that concludes the public comments we received. Again, they're posted. But I also want to quickly draw your attention to the meeting page where we've posted our upcoming 2021 meeting dates. It's in the other kind of buried in all the list of materials. So all of our meetings next year will be on the 3rd Wednesday of the month, with the exception of January. January 20th is Inauguration Day, so we're not planning to meet that day. We're going to meet on Thursday that week, January 21st, at the same time from 12 to 2. So I encourage you to mark your calendars for next year, and we'll post that again next month. So that concludes all my report, Chairman Russell.
Thank you very much, Lynn, for all that information. Okay, we are on to the approval of the October 21st, 2020 meeting minutes. I will invite a motion to adopt those minutes. Remember to unmute, state your name and jurisdiction when you make the motion.
So move, Pam Sebeski, City of Manassas.
Second, Councilmember Denise Mitchell, City of College Park.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any corrections or comments on the minutes? Okay, for the vote then, remember to state your name and jurisdiction, and I will only be asking again for nays or abstentions. Are there any nays or abstentions from DC?
Yay. Councilmember Todd.
Okay, well, we only need nays or abstentions, and anything else we'll assume is a yay vote. So was that a yay or a nay?
Yay.
Okay, So any nays or abstentions from Maryland? From Virginia? Or from WMATA or other federal agencies? Okay, the meeting minutes pass. Thank you very much. On to the report of the technical committee. We do have a written report, written summary of our technical committee's November 6th meeting, but we'd like to ask Kyle Nemhart, chair of our technical committee, to just brief us on the meeting. Kyle?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I do apologize not being able to join via web conference. I'm having some internet issues at home, so I do apologize about that. But good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Kyle Nemhart with the M.MTA Mark Train, and I'm chair of the technical committee, and I'm happy to brief the board on behalf of the committee regarding items that we had the opportunity to review prior to being presented to the board today. At our recent tech meeting, the committee had an opportunity to review the recommended projects for the FY21 Transportation Alternative Set-Aside Program for the District of Columbia, and you'll be hearing from Mr. Swanson today, and we look forward to the board's approval at today's meeting. We also had the opportunity to review the final recommended safety targets, thanks to a briefing by Mr. Eric Randall. As you may recall, the board was briefed on the recommended safety targets back in September, and we look forward to the board's additional feedback and approval at today's meeting as well. Additionally, as a heads up for the board to take action in December, the Tech Committee had the opportunity to review the recommended performance-based planning and programming for the draft 2017 to 2021 highway safety targets. John Sherman will be sharing the same information with the board that the Tech Committee had a chance to review earlier this month. And we anticipate that the board will move on these recommendations in December as well. In the meantime, we also look forward to your feedback following Mr. Sherman's briefing. And of course, it wouldn't be a Tech Committee meeting without a briefing from Mr. Brian Hayes, who has regularly updated us on the progress of the updates to the Citizen Advisory Committee and recruitment strategy. We had the opportunity to review where things stand with this effort, and after input provided by the Tech Committee, we look forward to the board's approval of these changes at today's meeting. And then finally, the Tech Committee reviewed the technical input solicitation for Visualize 2045, and you'll be receiving a briefing from TPB staff highlighting changes from the last transportation plan and transportation improvement program update cycle. That concludes my briefing on behalf of the TPB Technical Committee, and I'm happy to turn it back over to you, Madam Chair.
So much, Kyle. So I'll entertain any questions for Kyle. And again, we'll go by jurisdiction. So we'll start with the District of Columbia. Any questions? How about Maryland? Virginia? WMATA? Anyone? Okay, sounds like there are no questions. Thank you so much, Kyle. We really appreciate it. We're on to the Citizens Advisory Committee and the Access for All Advisory Committee reports. I'll start with the report from Nancy Abeles, our chair of our Citizens Advisory Committee, on the committee's discussions this month. Nancy?
Thank you, Chair Russell. Good day, everybody. The 2020 CAC met Thursday, November 12th for an online-only meeting, and we discussed recommendations for updating the CAC and Visualize 2045. You will be voting later today on the CAC update. First, at the meeting, Brian Hayes, TPB Transportation Planner, briefed us on staff recommendations for updating the CAC. He explained that one of the recommendations reflected input from jurisdiction partners. The committee endorsed the staff recommendations. In addition to endorsing the recommendations, the committee emphasized that though each of our members does hail from a specific jurisdiction from the TPB, we represent more than just our jurisdiction's perspective. We reiterated that we are more comfortable representing people with similar travel patterns rather than speaking for everyone who lives in our entire jurisdiction. While it makes sense to select members based on jurisdiction, our advice often transcends the jurisdictional perspective. We appreciate striving for parity among the D and the M and the V within the DMV, but we also feel that representation of all types of sub-region transportation environments around the area is the best path forward to ensure transportation equity and environmental justice throughout the region and serve the regional community and economy. A fully representational viewpoint is also critical to being able to consider a few a full spectrum of interactive factors involved in comprehensively improving the multimodal regional network. This is a timely and analogous proposition to what has come to pass in Montgomery County in the recent election. By referendum, people sought to add county council seats in underrepresented areas in the county, up county particularly, to more accurately accurately serve evolving demographic and land use needs and attributes. And we also shared our own general recommendations that the IT department within COG work with staff to improve the technology so we can have audio, visual, interactive meetings post-pandemic. We advocated for further leeway because some of us come from very far away areas and we do volunteer our time at night. We also advised that since there could be potentially 24 attendees at a meeting, that there be a little bit more procedural structure, perhaps limiting comments per discussion to 2 minutes per each member. Staff has put forward the updated application and encouraged us all to apply for the next committee term. And I'm sure we will have many willing returnees as committee members feel that our work is important and necessary to the region. Other briefings for Visualize 2045 updates, Stacy Cook briefed us on the timeline and planned activities for Visualize 2045, the 2022 update. She explained how the plan is updated and focused on how the technical input solicitation submission guide sets regional criteria for submission of jurisdictional projects. She said that the guide includes a new focus on aspirational initiatives and the focus for this past year, especially equity, safety, and climate. Then Abigail Zenner, TPB Communications Specialist, briefed us on plans for an ambassador program for the Visualize 2045 update. These ambassadors, which we've helped in the past with the rollout of Visualize 2045, can spread the word about the new plan and related outreach activities such as surveys. And we're happy to help again. We reacted very enthusiastically, including regarding the themed t-shirts and perhaps especially about the t-shirt. In other business, I briefed the committee about meetings in the past month, including the town halls on equity, which I recommend that they review. And then Lynn walked us through today's agenda. So if anybody has any comments or questions, I'm happy to take them. I turn it back over to you, Chair Russell. Thank you. And happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Happy and safe.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you for the well wishes as well. Great report. Are there any questions for Nancy? I'm not even going to ask for jurisdiction because that was a very thorough report. Okay. So next, on to our fine chair of the AFA, Casey Kostick, who has been chairing this for now for 3 years, I think. Casey, we are ready for your report.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. The AFA met on November 10th, and we had a report from Ms. Carla Elliott at Metro to discuss WMATA's 2020 Title VI program, including compliance procedures, public participation, and a language assistance plan. Some of the discussion items that followed were how WMATA gathers statistics on on-time performance and low-income households, how any service changes require an equity analysis to determine any disparate impact, the digital divide in outreach to low-income and minority populations, and how the American Community Survey census data is used by WMATA. Then after that, we spent the bulk of our meeting having a really thorough discussion about the impact of COVID on transportation and travel in the region. And first, we heard from TPB's Lynn Wenchel-Mendy about the impact and the responses on the Enhanced Mobility Grant projects. Some of the broad impacts included travel restrictions for populations that are at high risk, a decline in drivers and volunteers, since many of the driving assistance programs are run by volunteers, a shutdown of adult day and vocational programs, decreases in ridership, and an end to in-person activities that in many cases help combat isolation and depression for some of the people the organization serves. And some of the responses of the grantees to these challenges have been developing virtual travel training rather than in-person travel training, using the time to develop outreach materials or translate materials and increase social media presence, plan for next steps in work plans, recruit younger volunteer drivers, since in some cases older volunteer drivers being more high risk for COVID are not as willing or able to drive in the current situation. Using vehicles for delivery of Meals on Wheels, prescriptions, and groceries. Offering transportation for critical medical needs only. Ensuring safety of passengers by purchasing PPE. Developing partnerships with nonprofits and local governments. Maintaining vehicles and allowing additional trip purposes for vouchers and adding grocery delivery. We also heard from 2 subrecipients of the Enhanced Mobility Grant Program, including the ARC of Northern Virginia's adaptation to virtual travel training, and Capitol Hill Village's successful offering of a virtual peer-to-peer training. And then we heard from Mr. Meese from TPB with preliminary results of TPB staff research on data and information examining COVID's impact on travel and roadway traffic volumes in the region. Some of this is very similar to what we heard as a board last month, including traffic volumes and vehicle miles traveled dipping most dramatically in April and having recovered a bit since then. Truck travel never declining as much as passenger travel. The number of overall crashes and incidents going down during the pandemic, but major and fatal incidents remaining high. Transit ridership being reduced, but depending on vehicle, whether it's rail or bus, having some variations in exact ridership changes. And then also the importance of bus usage in particular for access to jobs and other needs during the pandemic. And then finally, we heard about the DC Transportation Equity Network, DC10, which is a cross-sector coalition of organizations that are committed to seeing a complete transportation system that ensures vulnerable travels are accounted for in the District of Columbia. So we're hoping to hear a little more about that initiative in the future. And then finally, as I announced last month, I have been chairing the committee for about the past 3 years, which it doesn't seem possible. It's really, the time has really flown by. But as I mentioned, I announced to the committee that we'll be transitioning to a new chair, and I believe that Chair Russell is going to announce who that is in the future, and really appreciate the opportunity to serve in this role. And I feel like I've learned a lot from it. So I know whoever is taking over the role will as well in the future. Thank you very much.
Casey, thank you so much. And thank you for 3 years. That's a really long commitment, but we really appreciated your participation and the way you convey the information to us. So thank you so much. Are there any questions for Casey? Anyone? Terrific. Was there a question?
Madam Chair, I just wanted to say, this is Canal from Alexandria. I just wanted to say thank you again to Ms. Kostek for her leadership over the last 3 years.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we all feel that way. All right, excellent. Let's move on now to the steering committee actions and report of the director. We do have a written summary of the November 6th steering committee meeting and report from Conti. Conti, is there anything that you'd like to add or highlight?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Chair and members of the board. I'll provide a bit more background information on one of the items in my written report. And I would also like to share some additional updates that was not in the written report. On page 5 of the memo is a copy of TPB's letter of support to Montgomery County, which is seeking a Federal Transit Administration grant. Earlier this year in October, actually, the FTA announced a nationwide $10 million grant program. This was purely in response to requests from transit agencies to fund research to identify solutions to address the operational challenges transit agencies are facing during the COVID, and to see how those things can be utilized moving forward. So the grants are intended to support activities that develop and deploy and even demonstrate some innovative solutions that improve operational efficiency of transit. Montgomery County is seeking $500,000 to implement a real-time automated passenger counting system on board the county's ride-on buses. The expectation is that the technology will provide not just real-time information to bus customers about available capacity and the information on alternate routes, but also be able to enhance the mobile ticketing application so that in the future, rear door boarding along with payment, contactless payment can be tested. So that's, we hope that the county is successful in its grant application. It will be a very useful demonstration of a new technology. I would also request you to please schedule an additional 30 minutes before the December meeting next month. This is for a special event. The event will be marking the start of the solicitation of updates to the projects, programs, and policies to be included in the TPB's long-range transportation plan, Visualize 2045. We need to have that plan approved by the feds by February of 2022, which means next year will be an extremely busy year for us to do all of the updates to the plan that's needed. A couple of additional updates, information that was not in the memo. You will probably, Maryland Governor Larry Hogan, along with Transportation Secretary Greg Flager and other officials, including the Maryland State Police Superintendent, hosted or will be hosting the 17th annual Maryland Remembers event that will be held at 10 a.m. on Monday, November 23rd. It's a virtual event. For those of you who may not be aware, Maryland Remembers honors the lives of Marylanders who have been killed or in impaired driving crashes. And we know from TPB's own work on safety this past year that impaired driving is one of the leading factors behind our region's unacceptably high number of fatalities and serious injuries. We'll be distributing the registration link for this virtual event after this meeting. Next, it's a brief update on the TPB Street Smart Pedestrian and Bicycle Safety Program. Members will recall that this is an annual program that we implement through the TPB, and we are in the middle of our fall 2020 campaign, which was adjusted due to the COVID pandemic. Therefore, there were no in-person events that we have typically been holding. I truly hope that we will be able to hold those in-person events next year. But we do have an extended campaign running not typically just 1 month, but throughout the entire fall. We have also expanded the number of awareness raising strategies. One of the newest one is a testimonial video wall, which uses digital media. And in this year's campaign, we have this touchless video wall available for displaying at outdoor locations. And I want to give a shout out to Terry Bellamy from Prince George's County that just this last weekend used the video wall at one of its Vision Zero safety events. It's called the Lives Shattered on Impact Testimonial Wall, and you will probably see some of the pictures of what it is and the people being able to come. And the testimonials are video recordings of the families who have lost a loved one in a roadway fatality. It's been a very moving and a very touching experience to recognize how critical roadway safety is and how important it is for all of us to be paying attention while on the roadways. So the last item, as part of the discussions last month and prior to the TPB endorsing the region's interim 2030 greenhouse gas reduction goal, a number of you asked about estimates of the level of outcomes in the transportation strategies that would be needed if the region were to attain its new goal for 2030, which is reducing the greenhouse gas emissions by 50% below 2005 levels. The idea from the discussion is that such estimates of how much would the projected increase in vehicle miles traveled have to be reduced, or how much of our fleet would have to be converted to clean fuel, such as electric vehicles, and what type of improvements to the operating conditions on the roadways, such as reducing number of incidents, would be useful to the state and local departments and transit agencies and other sub-regional organizations as they develop their capital program and prioritize which projects they are going to fund. WMATA also wrote to us with some of their ideas of what type of information would be useful. And I and Shyam have talked about it, and I thank Shyam for sharing his thoughts with me as well. So I'm glad to note that the staff will be indeed undertaking a technical analysis, and we plan to bring those briefings to this board over the first 6 months of next year. And as I mentioned last month, the first step we will be doing in this effort is to go back and look at the analysis that the TPB and COG has done over the past few years, and to compile from it all of the estimates that we have on what is the level of output we will be needing to address and to achieve our greenhouse gas reduction goals in all of the three broad transportation strategies.
Make a quick call, and I'm gonna call you
So the
right
three broad transportation strategies are reducing vehicle miles traveled, and there are so many ways of doing that, and converting our fleet from fossil fuel to clean fuel. It's not just individual passenger automobiles, but it is buses, school buses, transit buses, heavy-duty vehicles, and also what kind of operational improvements can we do on our roads, such as addressing speeding, reducing the accidents and incidents. All of this will be part of the new work that we'll be taking next year. That concludes my update, Mr. Chairman, and I'm happy to answer the questions.
Thank you very much, Kanti. We'll entertain any questions for Kanti. We'll start with the district. Virginia? Maryland? WMATA, or anyone else?
Hi, Chair Russell. This is Mark Phillips from WMATA. I want to thank Kanti for bringing up the letter that we wrote to him and his staff regarding setting VMT targets, or VMT reduction targets, to help the region actually meet those greenhouse gas reduction goals that the board approved last month. We have a couple of other comments related to setting those VMT targets in the long-range plan, the next update to that, as well as supporting some of the comments submitted by the Coalition for Smarter Growth. So I'll go into more detail on that when we get to the Visualize 2045 technical solicitation inputs. Just wanted to thank Kanti and kind of draw that line between the discussion he just made, or the point he just made about the greenhouse gases, and how to wrap that into the next updated long-range plan.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments before we move on? Great. Thank you so much, Kanti, for all of that information. So we're on to the chairman's remarks, and I do have an announcement. You may be aware that my tenure as chair of the TPB, as well as that of our vice chairs, Charles and Pam, will end next month when we'll be electing the next slate of candidates, or of officers of the board. So I'm sorry. I will be convening a nominating committee to bring us a slate of candidates next month. I want to thank Phil Mendelson from the District of Columbia, Ann Wheeler from Prince William County, and Patrick Woyan from the City of College Park for agreeing to serve on the nominating committee. So I very much appreciate that. Also, a friendly reminder about the virtual town hall series that we're co-hosting with the COG board this Friday at noon. This is the third of 5 town halls, and this session's topic is Whole Community Health Approach. We'll hear about aspects of a roadmap for inclusive and sustainable community economic development, including policies and regulations governing environment, land use, housing, and transportation. This meshes very well with what we have been working toward, a regional collaboration to improve the region's equity, prosperity, and resiliency moving forward. And I do hope that you will join us on Friday. That is all I have, so we'll get right to our action items. First is the 2021 TA Set-Aside Program. We'll be voting on the allocation of Federal Transportation Alternative Set-Aside Program funds for projects in the District of Columbia. Jaleel Reed on staff will brief us on the recommended projects and seek our approval. After his presentation, I'll be inviting a motion to adopt the resolution. Jaleel, take it away.
All righty. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Good afternoon. My name is Jaleel Reed, Regional Planner in the Department of Community Planning here at COG, and I'm pleased today to present you all a list of projects that have been recommended for funding under the Federal, Transportation Alternative Set-Aside Program, commonly called TAP. And for those who aren't too familiar, I don't want to sort of take any liberties. I'll be sharing some of the process and some of the quick overview with you all, but I'll spend most of my time today sharing with you all some high-level takeaways about our projects. Now, the TAP program is a program through which we partner with the state DOTs to support non-motorized transportation alternatives throughout the region. And we are coming to the TPB about 3 times a year to seek approval for TAP projects in the 3 states in our region. In July, you all approved projects for Maryland. And so today it's the District of Columbia's turn. Now, just as a quick hit before we dive in, for FY 2021 in the District of Columbia, DDOT informed TPB staff that the TPB has responsibility for project selection for up to $1.15 million. DDOT received 7 eligible applications representing a total of $727,161 in requested funding. So there's more than enough money there to fund these projects. Nonetheless, last month we conducted our established review process to ensure applications are supportive of the TPB's goals and ready for funding. And based on that review, we today are going to be recommending the funding of all 7 projects. Now, as I mentioned, I will share a bit of a refresher on the process and then dive into some of the key project takeaways. I'll say before I dive into the slides, and I will keep this short so that we can leave time for questions, I'm joined by DDOT on the phone and my colleague, John Swanson, just in case any gaps need to be filled in. Next slide. So just quickly, when it comes to the process, TAP is a federal program that provides funding to local jurisdictions to do good, small projects designed to enhance pedestrian and bicycle access, including trails and access to transit, ultimately advancing the TPB's regional priorities and emphasizing the need to improve safety and to increase access to opportunity for disadvantaged communities. Now, in the context of this solicitation, DDOT is officially the applicant for all 7 projects this year. Although in 3 cases, the applications and concepts were developed by other organizations that are listed as project advocates, and we're more than happy to unpack some of that offline if folks want more information. Now, when it comes to the TAP process, we rely on the states to administer the projects, to do the solicitation and screen applications for eligibility. And once our board has selected the projects, the state DOTs are responsible for getting these projects implemented. And needless to say, we are very grateful to them for their support in this process. Next slide. Now, just to reiterate, I covered a bit of this top line at the outset of our time today, but we're recommending the funding of 7 applications, representing a total of $727,161 in requested funding. And if there are no sort of questions about this slide, I'll just go ahead and dive into some of these highlights. You'll find that a couple of projects are on shared slides, given their similarity. But again, there are 7 projects. Next slide. So this project, the Canal Trailhead Project Enhancements Project, will enhance an existing TAP-funded project to develop a new trailhead at the Georgetown connection point of the Capitol Crescent Trail and the Canal towpath. These are 2 of the most heavily traveled bicycle and pedestrian trail routes in the region. They are both part of the National Capital Trail Network, which this board approved in July. And based upon additional community outreach, the requested enhancements will further improve the stairwell, incorporate a bike repair station, and put up wayfinding signage. Next slide. The Blair Road right-of-way analysis and acquisition project will fund analysis and acquisition of right-of-way to install a sidewalk on a half-mile section of Blair Road, northwest between 4th Street and Eastern Avenue. This section of Blair Road is missing a critical sidewalk connection to schools, transit, and a commercial business district. And this project is located in an equity emphasis area and in the Tacoma Park Activity Center and within half-mile of the Tacoma Metro Station. So really covering the gamut of the TPB regional priorities in the context of our review process. Next slide. And so here we have two of the projects joined on the same slide, both the tactical urbanism library and the curb extensions with murals. In this case, very pleased to be funding two tactical urbanism projects, which are focused on providing low-cost temporary changes that can often lead to permanent solutions. The tactical urbanism library will provide a storehouse of materials that can quickly deploy pedestrian safety resources to address concerns throughout the city. The library will offer an array of materials such as traffic cones, flexible delineator posts, temporary ADA ramps, and polymer plastic planters. And then moving to the curb extensions project, the curb extensions with ground murals will add curb extensions to 5 DC intersections that have been previously identified by the community through DDOT's livability study program. And each of these curb extensions will contain a ground mural designed by a local artist. Next slide. And our statue restoration of tigers on 16th Street Bridge and bisons on Dumbarton Bridge project will restore 4 bronze tigers on 16th Street Bridge and 4 bronze bisons on the Dumbarton Bridge, which date back to the early 1900s, 1907 and 1915 respectively, serving as ornamental gateways to the district. Both bridges exemplify the city's beautiful movement in urban design. And for more than a century, they've enhanced the transportation experiences for walkers, bikers, bus riders, and drivers throughout our region. Next slide. And last but not least, the Union Station head house floor tile replacement project will be building on restoration efforts funded with previous TAP grants. These projects at Union Station will replace worn floor tiles and repair masonry at Union Station. As many of you know, if not all of you, Union Station is the region's premier multimodal transportation facility and transit hub, and serves over 37 million people annually, just about 100,000 per day. So with that covers the gamut of our projects for this year's TAP solicitation for DC. Just want to reiterate, we are incredibly excited about these projects and look forward to the improvements they will bring to DC and our region. I want to leave you with one last parting shot. Similar to the MDOT solicitation, this year's solicitation through DC was undersubscribed. So we're working diligently to figure out ways to amplify the program, figure through different channels of outreach to ensure that we can increase the incidence of applications year over year. And with that, I will ask the board for approval of the resolution R9 2021 and open it up for questions if there are any. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jaleel. I really like those urban tactical projects. Those are so cool. Are there any questions for Jaleel before we entertain a motion? Okay, I will take a motion then to approve resolution R9 2021.
Move favorable.
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, I got a couple of, I'm going to give Vice Chair Allen the motion, and who else was the second?
Councilmember Taveras.
Councilmember Taveras will give you the second on that. Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay, again, just
Madam Chair?
reiterating that.
And Madam Chair,
I'm sorry? Yes.
Chair, I would like to make some comment. I appreciate the projects. These are great projects. I have no concerns and criticism about that. But what I do want to raise that it does seem that there is an ongoing problem here with a lack of obligation of these funds, and it was true for Maryland. It's true for DC. We had less than 40% less than 50% of the total funds in Maryland obligated. We discussed that last month, and I think it would be great if we could get a little bit more analysis into why this continues to be happening. I know, and I spoke with Mr. Scott about this, but it just seems that there's a lot of bike head priorities that we have in our region. The Capital Trails Coalition, which is Capital Trails Network, which is going to be over $1 billion worth of trails that we all prioritizing, but yet we don't seem to be able to obligate and get out these critical federal funds to get these projects on the ground. It seems to be a recurring problem, and I'm wondering what more we can do about it.
Absolutely, Mayor, and you said what I was about to say, that we're leaving money on the table, and so we need to figure out how to get that money out there into good use.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Warren and Ms. Russell. We talked about this at the steering committee as well. From the staff perspective, we are looking to enhance our outreach in terms of advertising and soliciting applications. The applications really need to come from the member agencies. This is limited to the transportation jurisdictions and the transportation agencies. So in addition to we are looking at how early can we start to get the word out and how much more active, who else can we reach out to. We work through our technical committee members. We work through our bike and pedestrian subcommittee members. But particularly this time, we wanted this board to recognize that there is funding available. And particularly this July's adoption of both the National Capital Trail Network and the identification of the transit access improvement locations. There are 200 of them, and we have prioritized 49 of them. So there is now, in my view, a long list of projects that this money can be made available. One thing I would note, though, is these grants require matching funds. So at least about 20% of the local funding is to be made available. And the state transportation departments do look for the project to be ready to go because these funds need to be utilized in a certain period of time. So I think just today, the board having that discussion that there is funding available, there are projects and priorities that the TPB has identified. Let us work to make sure that we utilize every dollar that's.
Great, thank you. I hope that we can start working and thinking about next year when these grants come around again, how we really line up these projects. And I understand that there are matching funds that are needed and all that, but how do we line up these projects to really make sure that we get a much more robust round of applications next year and get these projects done?
And I'll just add something specifically if I could, and then John, feel free to fill in any gaps. So one of the things that we've sort of started to get really keen on is the extent to which our TLC program projects queue up TAP application opportunities. And so for the programs that make it through our TLC program that are a little further along, what Conti's sort of describing as the sort of readiness for implementation, making sure that we can get it on the radars of those jurisdictions and their projects respectively, and just continue to elevate it, right? So to your point, Patrick, about lining up these projects, that is the onus of that to some extent is really on the jurisdictions. But we're definitely going to do what we can to, play our role to continue to emphasize the importance of TAP and wherever it's appropriate, make it clear that certain projects could potentially be eligible. And put it on people's radars. Yeah.
Well, this is Gary Arnrich, Montgomery County. Thank you. It's a really important topic. Part of the other issue is that a lot of our projects are too big. They're too expensive for this funding category. And you have to fund it entirely. The state requires us to fund it entirely with the money, as opposed to saying you get half this year and half another year. You can't break the project up. So that is also a part of the problem, that we have our projects designed, we're in design, that there is insufficient funds to fund the projects that we want to propose. So that's another question, another concern.
Thank you for that. Any other comments? Okay, I lost track of where we are. I guess we are ready for a vote. So I will call for nays or abstentions from the District of Columbia, from Maryland, from Virginia, WMATA or other agencies. Outstanding. The motion carries. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate that discussion. I think it's helpful for us all to be more mindful of the situation and spend those dollars as we can. So we'll move on now to item 8, performance-based planning and programming. This is the action on transit safety. Eric briefed us on the background and draft targets last month. And after his update today, I will be asking for a motion to adopt the resolution for the transit safety targets. So Eric, the floor is yours.
Right. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the board. As the Chair stated, in September, the board received a detailed briefing on the federally required performance-based planning and programming process to set annual transit safety targets. This is required of applicable transit agencies across the region and NPOs to set annual safety targets for 4 measures: fatalities, serious injuries, safety events, and reliability. Sergio, can you bring up the resolution and the table, please? These 4 performance measures are set for each mode of transit. So for heavy rail, which is Metro Rail in this region, streetcar rail, urban bus, so these are the combined targets for all the bus systems in the region, and then commuter bus and paratransit. So we briefed draft targets back in September. This is the final draft set of targets for your approval. There have been some minor adoptions as some of the agencies wrapped up their formal adoption of their targets, but these changes were minor. In addition to this resolution that's in your mail packet, there's also a more detailed report that also has some additional information on transit safety data in the region. With that, I'll ask the board adopt Resolution R10-2021, setting transit safety targets for the region, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Great. I will go ahead and ask for a motion to adopt the resolution R10-2021.
So moved. Emmett Jordan from Greenbelt.
I heard Emmett Jordan's name, and I needed the name for the second, please.
Second from Christian Dorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Dorsey. Is there discussion or questions on this?
Hi, Chair Russell. This is Mark from WMATA. I just want to thank Eric and his team for all of his hard work on this and, creating such a smooth process.
Thank you for that. Okay, I'll just check by jurisdiction. Anyone from the district? Anyone from Maryland with questions or comments?
Yeah, this is Casey from Tacoma Park. I remember that when we talked about this at the meeting last month, I think there was a question about methodology and common methodology across the different agencies in terms of setting targets and tracking them. Is that something that you have any further information on, or something that is going to be worked on in the future in terms of sort of standardizing those methodologies?
So the Federal Transit Administration, the FTA, issued quite detailed guidance on how this safety performance measures are supposed to be tracked and reported. I will say that as with the other areas of performance measures, the first time is always the hardest. We've had to ask some questions of how each transit agency went about this, and some of them went about it a different way. I believe that this data is consistent and coordinated across the region, but I expect that we'll continue to improve our process, particularly next year when we both have to set these annual targets once again, but also we'll be able to report on performance versus these targets. So it's, I'd give us a B+ right now, and I hope to move to an A in the future. There are some issues we're still, trying to improve on all the time.
Thank you.
Thanks for that question, Casey. Thank you, Eric. Anyone else from Maryland? How about Virginia? And we heard from WMATA. Anybody else? All right, with that, I will ask for nay or abstentions from the District of Columbia. From Maryland. Virginia. And WMATA or other agencies. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much for your hard work on this, Eric. Okay, we are on now to the Citizens Advisory Committee update, approval, and recruitment. This is the last, but certainly not the least of our action items for today. Brian briefed us last month on suggestions for a few changes to our Citizens Advisory Committee. We have heard valuable feedback from our technical committee and our Citizens Advisory Committee chair about this. Brian will present us with the final recommendations now, and after that, I will invite a motion to adopt a resolution to make the changes. Brian, take it away.
Thank you, Chair Russell. Good afternoon, everyone. During today's item, I will do three things. First, I'm going to briefly remind the board of the staff recommendations for updating the Citizens Advisory Committee. I will focus on changes that we're making to the committee structure, as the chair said, based on input we received from the technical committee and TPB members. Second, I will call upon the board to assist staff with recruitment for next year's CAC. And finally, I will encourage the board to adopt Resolution R11-2021 to update the CAC. Next slide. So as a quick reminder, the goals of this update are to ensure that the committee members represent the variety of jurisdictions and communities in the National Capital Region, to strengthen the relationship between elected officials on the board and the committee, and to modernize operating procedures and member expectations. Next slide. This page, the slide lists all 8 recommendations for the updating committee. These recommendations seek to accomplish the goals that I mentioned on the previous slide. Real quick, we're going to change the name from Citizens Advisory Committee to Community Advisory Committee. We will update the mission of the committee to reflect the TPB's commitment to equity. We are going to make meetings more accessible by hosting a mix of in-person and online meetings. We're going to change the term length from 1 to 2 years. We will provide more training between the time that members are selected in January and before their first meeting in February. We're going to clarify member expectations. We're going to update the committee structure. And finally, we're going to update the process for selecting members. Basically, staff will make recommendations to the TPB officers who will then make their recommendations to the board. Next slide. So based on the goal to get residents from more member jurisdictions on the committee, staff's original recommendation was to shift from selecting members by state to selecting members by TPB subregion. Since sharing that recommendation, staff received feedback from the district, Arlington County, and Alexandria. Based on that input, we changed the recommendation. Staff now recommend updating the committee structure by naming members from each state and naming additional members to incorporate more perspectives and to ensure diversity. This recommendation builds upon the current approach. It starts by selecting 5 committee members from each of the 3 states, the District of Columbia, Maryland, and Virginia. In addition to those 15 members, 9 additional members will be selected. These members will be selected to incorporate their perspectives of communities in TPB member jurisdictions and in TPB subregions. The advantage of this hybrid approach is that it builds upon the current committee structure, starting with that state perspective, but adding more perspectives from across the region. Next slide. Something else that the board hasn't seen is that staff have developed selection criteria to help make our recommendation to the TPB officers. These criteria provide structure and consistency so that staff are kind of selecting committee members based on the same things again and again. These criteria are designed to help staff select experienced membership who represent the TPB subregions and as many member jurisdictions as possible. More importantly, they also seek to balance racial and ethnic diversity and a variety of transportation perspectives on the committee. Next slide. So here's our timeline. As you can see, recruitment is already underway. In order to get staff recommendations to the 2021 TPB officers following the December board meeting, the application window closes on December 10th. Later this week, I will reach out to the board with materials and guidance that you can use to help us raise awareness about the CAC and encourage your constituents to apply. Our goal is to have the board approve appointments at the January board meeting. It should be the 21st, not the 20th, and the first CAC meeting of the first Community Advisory Committee meeting will be on February 8th, 2021. So next slide. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me directly. You can get my phone number or my email address. Otherwise, staff recommend that the board adopt resolution R11-2021 to update the CAC.
Thank you so much, Brian. Thank you for all the work and the collaboration of all of the folks that have given input into this. This is really important, I think. So I'm going to start with inviting a motion for adoption of resolution R11-2021.
Madam Chair, Ms. Besky, so move.
And I'll second.
Ms. Newton, second. Thank you. Is there any discussion or questions? And let's start with the District of Columbia. Maryland? Virginia?
If I may, Madam Chair.
So
Christian Dorsey from Arlington. I'd just like to commend the hybrid approach, Mr. Hayes, and all those who work to effectuate it. I think it's a great way of ensuring that TPB can continue to reflect the diversity of our region while seeking out the expertise and added voices that are needed. It's the great way to be additive so that we don't have a structure that inhibits that great work that comes from the newly named committee, the Community Advisory Committee. So thank you.
I concur. Thank you, Mr. Dorsey. Anything? Anybody? Mayor Newton, were you raising your hand or just waving? Okay. Trying to see and pay attention here.
I was just clapping.
Anybody?
I was just clapping to support Christian. So.
Oh, okay. All right. Yes. So does anybody else have any more questions or comments? Just jump right in. Okay, this is very exciting. So again, I echo the thanks and commend all of you, and particularly the CAC and their work. Their future work as the Community Advisory Committee. And so I'll go ask for votes then. Again, we're only needing nays or abstentions, and we'll start with the District of Columbia. Maryland. Virginia. And WMATA or other agencies. All right, that passes unanimously. Changes are made. Thanks again so much.
So, Ms. Chair.
Congratulations.
Thank you all. If I could just add, wanted to wait till the board acted to share with you. We have received very upbeat, positive feedback from Federal Highway and the FTA on these changes. They are very interested. They're excited to see, because the entire Citizens Advisory Committee Act, as it used to be called till now, it is not a federal requirement. It was something that the TPB had done to ensure that it was receiving input from the public. And to see these additional enhancements and to bring this diversity and inclusivity, I've had both agencies reach out to me, and they are hoping that we will be able to share some of this work and some of the other future webinars with other MPOs. So thank you all very much.
Thank you for sharing that, Conti. Okay. That was the last of our action items. We're on to the first of our information items. We're going to hear from John, who's going to brief us on the next update to the highway safety targets. This will be for the 2017 to 2021 periods, and we will be asked to adopt these targets next month. John?
Thank you, Chair Russell and members of the board. So back in January of this year, this board adopted its third set of highway safety targets for our region. As laid out in federal regulations, setting safety targets is an annual occurrence, and so I am here to talk about the next set of regional safety targets. And my remarks will be brief, but there is a detailed report in your mail-out packet that provides additional information about the safety target setting requirements for NPOs and the methodology used to develop the proposed targets. Next slide, please. But before I get to the proposed targets, I would like to provide some information to you on a couple of closely related items. These include a review of recent trends in the data for the 5 required safety performance measures and a review of how we did with respect to the set of targets that were established in January of 2019. Then I will share this year's staff recommended safety targets for your consideration. And I will also make a few remarks about the work this board has done in 2020 to improve roadway safety and share a few thoughts about how that work might relate to these federally required targets. Next slide, please. First, the safety trend. Next slide, please. This table shows the last 5 years of annual data for each of the 5 safety performance measures. And the news is not great. Fatalities increased by nearly 5% between 2018 and 2019. Regional VMT increased slightly between 2018 and 2019 as well, which is why the fatality rate shows a slightly lower 3.5% increase. The number of serious injuries continued to decline like it has done each year since 2016. It dropped by a little more than 4%, and again, because VMT increased slightly, the serious injury rate fell by 5.4%. Perhaps the most troubling is the almost 10% increase in the number of non-motorist fatalities and serious injuries, which has now reached the highest level since 2009, when the figure was 612. Next slide, please. So now that 2019 data are in, we can assess our performance against the second set of targets that this board adopted back in January of 2019. At that point, we did not yet have either the 2018 or 2019 data. So next slide, please. And okay, so you have seen this slide a number of times. I included it here as a reminder that the performance measures are 5-year rolling averages and not annual numbers, and that the feds have prescribed the measures and the data to be used. And I also want to take just a moment to let you know that the prescribed data source for fatalities is NHTSA's Fatality Analysis Reporting System, or FARS. And so every other year when I've come to you at this time, we have had the FARS data in, and I've included the FARS data as part of the performance measures. This year is the first year where it's not out yet, so we are using the state-provided fatality data for this. And I think that the FARS data will likely be available before I come back to you next month. So I will use that data if that's the case. And historically, that data doesn't change very much. It's very close to the state-reported data. So I don't anticipate numbers to be very different from what I'm presenting here. But just as an FYI, that you're likely to see some minor changes in some numbers once that FARS data is available and incorporated into these measures. Next slide, please. So here we can see that we handily met the serious injury and serious injury rate targets, but we did not meet the fatality target or the fatality rate target or the number of non-motorist fatalities and serious injuries target. So, if we had met these targets, it would have meant that fewer of our residents and visitors would have died or been seriously hurt. So it is not good that we didn't meet our targets. However, there are no federal consequences for NPOs like us that do not meet their targets. Next slide, please. Now on to our recommended targets. Next slide, please. So just as I know I've said this before, but just as a brief reminder, the federal regulations require NPOs to set safety targets every year. And you have set safety targets in January 2018, January 2019, and December 2019 already. State DOTs are also required to set highway safety targets, but they're required to do so by the end of August each year, and our DOTs have done that again this year. Also, the regulations do say that the targets should be data-driven and realistic. So, and another feature I mentioned before is just that these targets are 5-year rolling averages, not annual numbers. So, next slide, please. And again, the methodology we use to develop the recommended targets is the same this year as it was last year. And basically, each state has their own methodology for setting statewide safety targets, and that reflects their best estimates of how their safety programs, projects, and policies will affect performance measures. So we, TPB staff, incorporated each of our state's target setting approach to developing our regional targets. In a nutshell, the methodology we used was to apply each state's methodology to their respective portions of our region and then combine them into a regional target. Also, for those measures where this methodology resulted in higher targets, we capped them so that we aren't recommending a higher target this year than was adopted by the board last year. Next slide, please. So this slide shows what our targets would be if we didn't apply that last step that I just mentioned, if we didn't cap the results. So you can see that the target for a number of fatalities and fatality rate would be significantly higher than what it was last year if we didn't cap it, as would the target for non-motorist fatalities and serious injuries. As I mentioned before, the target that we calculated using this process is actually lower for both the number of serious injuries and the serious injury rates. So if you go to the next slide, so this table shows the targets after the cap is applied. And these are the targets that staff are recommending for your consideration. That is, we propose to keep the fatality target at 253.0, keep the fatality rate target at 0.588 fatalities per 100 million vehicle miles traveled, and keep the non-motorist fatalities and serious injuries target at 508.6. We also propose that the serious injury target should be reduced from what it was last time to 2,435.8, and that the serious injury rate target should be reduced to 5.539 serious injuries per 100 million vehicle miles traveled. Next slide, please. This table puts these proposed targets into context with the targets that you have set previously. And now I just want to say a few words. So this round of targets are based on data that is pre-COVID and pre-TPB safety resolution. So what should or could we expect to see in coming years? So I remember back when this board adopted the very first set of regional safety targets, it was crystal clear that the number of fatalities and serious injuries on our roadways are unacceptable. And you commissioned then a study to investigate the factors behind these unacceptable numbers and to recommend, how we could move the numbers in the right direction. And you reviewed the findings of that study earlier this year, and in July, you adopted a resolution calling on TPB members to work individually and collectively to improve behaviors that are proven to work. And you established and funded a regional safety program to help member jurisdictions and agencies develop and implement projects to improve roadway safety. So I just have to remind you that we know what works. We know the countermeasures that work are listed in your safety resolution. And because the evidence is in that those types of countermeasures do work, we can expect that the more of them we implement across the region, individually and collectively, the more positive safety effects will accrue. And then, how that relates to these performance measures. So these regional safety performance measures and your work to set targets on them every year will help us track the regional effects of our collective actions. So one other thing I'll say is that since these are 5-year rolling averages, it could take a while for numbers to be reflected in our 5-year averages, but that's why I will always be reporting to you the annual numbers as well when we come to these meetings, and perhaps we will need to have additional, more detailed safety numbers that you can see more often than just these numbers. So anyway, let's go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so next steps, next slide, please. So we will finalize our targets based on the board's feedback and if we get the FARS data between now and then. And then we'll be back in December to request board approval of the regional highway safety targets. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions. And thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. We continue to be disheartened by not being able to lower some of those numbers. So I'll ask if there are any questions, and I will start with folks from the District of Columbia. Okay, from Maryland.
Hi, this is Councilmember Taveras. So well, I'll start by prefacing the presentation with saying that I feel very deeply about this particular issue, given the fact that at least most of the fatalities that are occurring are in my jurisdiction, and they are the highest in the state, if not the highest, as Vic Weisenberg would rightly correct me. So, so I'm very concerned about these targets. The fact that I'm a little bit saddened at the fact that we're not challenging ourselves by trying to lower the goals is to challenge ourselves to actually meet those numbers and try to improve them, I think is telling. But I also, my question would be, how are we incorporating some of the comments that have been made by the Center for Smart Growth in terms of the improvements of these highway safety targets?
So, Ms. Tavares, I'm happy to start and then invite John as well. I think the board over the past couple of years has emphatically noted that it is not satisfied with the safety outcomes on the region's roadway systems, whether it's in Prince George's County or anywhere. The region and the TPB have collectively embraced Vision Zero or towards zero death. That remains the goal. This specific requirement to adopt targets is a federal requirement. And in addition to that, the feds have advised and have made it part of the rule that the targets we adopt should not be aspirational. Those could be goals, but they want us to be driven by data. They want us to collect the data, reflect on the data, and the targets should be set. This has been one of the challenges. So the TPB, in my view, has seen adopting the targets as meeting a federal requirement, but the TPB has not been focused on simply meeting that. The TPB has been focused on achieving its goal of zero death towards Vision Zero towards zero death. So that is where the policy thinking is. In terms of how to help get there, unfortunately, we have not been able to make that correction in the trend that the data is going very quickly. And one of the things that we have done is earlier this year, the TPB set aside $250,000 of its own planning money to make it available to all of the 23 member jurisdictions to help them evaluate and implement solutions that can help reduce fatalities and serious crashes in the region. It has also published a set of 30 or 38 strategies that transportation agencies at state, local, and regional level can implement to help do that. So in other words, we are just going to be adding more of an emphasis and a regional focus to try and achieve this, but the goal is still zero deaths.
No, for sure, Conti. And maybe this is just me getting into my nerdy zone, but I've always really appreciated the research of Dan Irely out of Duke on rational behaviors and irrational activities and how it reinforces bad behaviors. And I do think that while we want to talk about data-driven information in terms of transit, where does the human cognitive aspect of the cognitive dissonance that occurs on a person who engages in inappropriate pedestrian activity to correct and self-correct to improve outcomes? And I don't know if that's maybe, again, this may be a little bit on the more cerebral tip, but I was just curious in terms of this level of analysis as we look to improve the data.
I agree. From my own sense, changing our own behavior is very challenging. It is something that we have to continue to endeavor to find all the buttons to push to get us to behave better, particularly when we are on the roadway. The transportation safety strategies that the TPB endorsed earlier this year has a number of roadway design strategies that takes into consideration such cognitive and such behavioral elements when designing the roadway features itself. Context-sensitive speed limits, reducing speed limits is another aspect that is, and building public awareness, public education. So there are a number of such strategies. The Street Smart Safety campaign that the TPB has been running is yet another example. So I think it's not just any one of them. We will have to do many of these, and not just on a one-off basis, on a regular basis, so much so that it becomes part of our everyday thinking and behavior. So there is no question that there is much work to be done.
Okay, and I'll close with this. So on that end, it might be valuable for me to come forward with some of the work that we're doing out of my district on streetscaping, on figuring out how we could institute a road diet on University Boulevard with the coming of the Purple Line, and so that we can try to see how we can get you guys' input and some of the work that we just had a presentation last night on this very issue. Again, this is the roadway from New Hampshire to University to Adelphi Road is if not the #1 area in the whole state of Maryland where there are pedestrian deaths. So I think that if we can come in and do a presentation of the work that we're doing out of my district on this very issue, I think that it will clearly translate to targeted improvements on some of these statistics. So I'll close with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember, very much. We are still in questions from Maryland.
Hi, this is Vic Weisberg with Prince George's, and just want to follow up to many of the things that the Councilmember Tavares just mentioned. Prince George's County last year became a Region 0 jurisdiction, and I want to thank Conti for highlighting Director Bellamy and the Street Smart campaign, the Wall of Remembrance that was at the mall at Prince George's over the weekend, and just really the need to triple, quadruple, our efforts in tackling this problem, and everything compounds. And I want to thank John Sherman and TPB and the board for endorsing and moving forward with a program to try to address these issues. Councilmember Taveras pointed out the effort that she and Park and Planning and us as a partner have been involved with to really focus in on the 193 corridor. There are, and it is unfortunately the corridor that has the highest pedestrian crashes and fatalities in both the state and in the region. So we really need to double our efforts on what are now the 6 E's. And I want to thank TPB for adding the E's of equity and the E of evaluation, because really looking at this comprehensively is how we're going to get our hands around it.
Thank you. Just in the spirit of moving this along, I'm going to move on to Virginia. Comments or questions?
Yeah, real quick, Earl Lewis from MDOT. I want to second the comments of both Councilwoman Tavares and Vic Weisberg. This is something we're never going to give up on. One life for injury is too many, and we got to get these numbers down, and we have to work in concert together to do that and get the word out where there's behavior that needs to change, which is the case oftentimes. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Mr. Schneider.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I want to thank you for your leadership in the TPB for the work that we've done on safety. It was this process that triggered the need to move forward and helped us recognize the critical and urgent needs that we've been addressing one way or the other. To be brief, I think we need more ambitious goals than we see in this draft. I think that's going to be important to our future success. So that's my one comment about this draft. We need to be more ambitious in our goals. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and everyone who's been involved in this effort.
Thank you, Mr. Schneider. You have been inspirational too in this. Anybody else from Virginia?
Madam Chair, Vic
Yes.
County. I don't want to. I know we got to move this along, but I felt compelled to comment on this because last night at our board meeting, it's been a big issue when we start talking about pedestrian accidents and speeding in the neighborhoods and all of this. And it's one of my highest priorities as a member of Prince William County Board. I appreciate this entire conversation. And I know this is a large forum because it involves so many states. And I'm down here in little old, as they say, Prince William County, dealing with these issues that are holistic for all of us. And I really love these efforts. I really want to make sure we stay committed to this and further it along to really get to a place that we can seriously stop these accidents. And I use, her name is Debbie Talbert, who was killed on the road here in Cardinal Drive from a speeder who she had just posted the day prior that they were speeding on her road and she died the next day. And so it's really personal for me. So I really want to throw that out there and just thank you for the efforts here. There's a lot more work to be done, and I want to be a part of this initiative and to push it forward so we can really see results. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for your comments, and I'm so sorry for the loss for your community. And I know that we all suffer these losses, and that's the thing that we have to keep really remembering is that we're not talking about numbers here. We're talking about people's lives. So I believe that we are fully committed, and moving forward, we'll continue to be committed to these efforts. And I don't even know why we call them accidents anymore. They're crashes. They're these aren't things that are accidental. These are things that happen because people make bad choices. And so I think we need to really start thinking about that. Mr. Meyer, I see your hand.
Yeah, the law enforcement officials in my jurisdiction have said repeatedly that between 9:30 p.m. and 1 a.m. every Friday and Saturday night, 1 out of every 5 drivers, that's 20%, are legally intoxicated. I also lost a friend to a drunk driver, and I think until we actually, as elected officials, talk candidly about alcohol and the relationship between bars and restaurants and drunk driving and call it what it is, we're not going to really be honest with ourselves about it. And I've noticed a hesitancy among elected officials because of the influence of restaurants and bars in the economic life of our jurisdictions, that people don't, and I'm not putting the blame on them, but this is a cultural challenge that we have that we just don't want to. We just seem hesitant to really talk about it straightforwardly. I mean, the people who drink to excess and get behind the wheel of a car have an alcohol dependency problem. They are alcoholics. They call it what it is. And these people inadvertently, they don't intend to do it, but they inadvertently kill people. And at least I would say probably close to 50% of our fatalities are alcohol related. And so I don't know where I'm going with this comment, except to say we need to verbalize it and put it out there so that everybody can recognize it for what it is.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. Appreciate that very much. Yeah. Okay. With that, unless there's anybody else who has something they're burning to say right now, we do need to move on. Again, I appreciate all of the, this is a very emotional topic for people, and we need to do better. So thank you for that. We're going to move on now to the Visualize 2045 technical input solicitation. Stacy's going to review the draft of the technical input solicitation document. This is the document that outlines the TPB's policy priorities to inform the changes to the projects, programs, and policies to be included in our next long-range transportation plan. This is a draft document, so we can provide our input on it, not just today, but in the following weeks and next month, we will be asked to release the finalized document. So Stacy, I'll turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, Chair Russell and members of the board. As Chair Russell mentioned, the technical input solicitation guide and the associated appendix, there's some typing if someone could please mute. And the associated appendix, as well as a detailed form, are all included for your review. But today I am going to highlight several items that I think are of most importance for you to consider during your review. I will be coming back to you in December, as Chair Russell noted, to ask for approval of this document. At the end of this presentation, members of the public and members of the board may certainly email me with any comments. We'll need to make our updates around the end of the month. So through the end of November, would be most encouraged to provide those comments. Next slide, please. So today I will be discussing the technical and policy purpose of the technical input solicitation, the contents and some key updates that we're making with a focus on regional priority questions. And then I'll speak a bit about your role as the board and welcome any questions from you in time available. Next slide, please. So let's take a step back. Where are we in this process? I shared this timeline for our long-range transportation plan update. As it is a quadrennial plan, it is due in 2022. We aim to take it to you to ask for approval in June of 2022. Our last plan you approved in October of 2018. And so with the request for new projects to update the constrained element of the plan, we'll formally begin this plan, although our planning activities and work are really ongoing. Next slide, please. So you'll see where this cover of the document that I'm asking you to review is really aligned with this blue square in the technical policy track. The green track is for our public participation elements, the blue for our technical and policy work. And this, so this is really where we are at in the process. With the adoption of this document in December, if you do approve it, we'll officially be kicking off our call for projects. Next slide, please. So what is the technical input solicitation? This document, it's about maybe 40 pages in total, provides transparency in our process to communicate to you, our board, members of the public, and other interested parties about the steps that we take to ask our members that propose new projects for what they are expected to do, the information they are expected to provide, and then also how do we use this information? And so I'll speak to that. But ultimately, this document might not be that interesting when you read it compared to some of the things you might have available to read, but it is incredibly important because it is the bridge between all the important consensus building that you, our board, do to focus on equity, to focus on safety, to focus on all of the other policy priorities that you come together on. And so this document bridges what we ask our members for when it comes to the projects. And it also addresses those federal requirements that we are required to meet for the plan. So we take it to you because of its important role in the development of our long-range plan. Next slide, please. So with a focus on why does this document matter, we ask our members to take a look at their local and regional needs, and to, in particular, as developing local projects, to work with other members to focus on projects that can really address regional needs, as you have established through our policy framework and as we highlight as staff through our analysis. Those projects must be included in order to meet federal requirements, especially those related to the air quality conformity analysis that we must conduct. And if there's a single federal dollar attached to a project, such as a sidewalk project, it must be included in our document. We also ask that our members consider the priorities that you establish, and that all of you focus back at your own jurisdictions to emphasize, to accelerate and prioritize those projects that reflect those regional priorities, as many of which we're just discussing today, such as safety, and last month, such as climate resiliency. This all becomes inputs to the constrained element of our long-range plan. There is more to our plan than just the projects. The planning that we do together and the longer strategies are important as well. But this all really becomes the future of our regional transportation system. So we do emphasize why it matters. Next, please. I put this slide together in order to help share information with all viewers about this relationship between the establishment of our policy framework, which is ever evolving, and as we rededicate ourselves to issues such as equity, climate resiliency, safety, and other issues. And so the policy framework is established. Our staff evaluate and report system performance to all of you. And we help highlight challenges and opportunities through our objective analysis and the forecast of performance of our transportation system based on the project information we receive. Together, you all come together to respond to that information, to develop strategic solutions. This is where we build consensus in order to direct these long-term projects. As we all know, projects take quite a bit of time to develop. And so the aspirational initiatives are a good example, where we focused on what can we do more of that helps advance our goals in the region together. So then we turn back to our member agencies that then submit projects, policies, and develop programs to address the local and regional needs. They prioritize the funding, determine a funding approach, and submit this information that we pull together for inclusion in the long-range plan and to conduct our air quality conformity analysis. Next slide, please. So that last bullet there is where we are at now with this technical input solicitation. This is the table of contents. You'll see that there are numerous aspects dedicated to technical instructions for your local staff. And there are sections that focus on the federal and regional priorities. Next slide, please. These priorities are where I'd like to focus now. So when members that sponsor projects submit a new project to a constrained element of the long-range plan, we have nearly 50 questions that we ask with a bunch of subparts. But we do ask questions specific about the regional transportation priority plan goals. And in the next few slides, I'm going to review those questions that have been updated to reflect the aspirational initiatives, safety, equity, and climate change, to include the mitigation targets based on our board's emphasis over the last year. But we do have a significant amount of information, data that is collected about these projects. For example, is it a bicycle project? If so, what type of bicycle project it is? Is it a transit project? If so, which type? And then we collect geospatial data for all of our projects as well, in order to have a clear understanding where all of these projects are. And that's all really important because that enables us to conduct analysis, to provide information to you, members of the public, through maps, interactive maps. And so this information is all overlaid, so we can look at projects in terms of where they are in relationship to equity emphasis areas, or our activity centers, high-capacity transit centers, such as in our new TOC map. We also use it for environmental mitigation interactive maps and lots of information that we share. So while I will be focusing today on these regional priority questions, we do have information that addresses a lot of different policy issues, and we present that to you and the public at large. Next slide, please. So when it comes to our regional transportation priority plan goals, there are 6 of them. You can see where they are laid out here in the left column. And I'm not expecting you to see the tiny font on this slide, but I wanted to just show where our new equity questions, our updated safety and climate questions are landing in this list. And this is a real good list to highlight some of the types of questions that we ask, even though we collect more data than just these questions listed here that focus on our policies. Next slide, please. So what's new? When it comes to our aspirational initiatives, we have revised the document to ask, how do these projects align with our aspirational initiative? Which of them, or several of them, might they be implementing? We also ask, provide a space for text so that our members that are submitting projects can also respond to explain more in detail how their project makes a difference in our regional transportation system. Next slide, please. In response to your 2020 safety resolution, we have updated our safety question. This is also responsive to 2 goals that incorporate safety. So previously, our question asked whether or not a project might have improved safety for motorists, transit users, pedestrians, or bicyclists. But now we've updated to ask if it significantly reduces fatalities or injuries, right? That's what we want, our loved ones to be safe. And so since most projects actually do have some safety element, we really wanted to be able to pull out and report which projects significantly reduce fatalities and injuries. Next slide, please. In response to your 2020 equity resolution, there are 2 goals to which we've added questions regarding equity. One of those questions is whether or not the project is physically located in an equity emphasis area. And another is whether or not it connects an equity emphasis area to an activity center. And while this is just one look at equity, and there are so many different ways to consider and advance equity, we wanted to include these questions, and we'll continue to conduct other policy and technical analysis to help share information about that may help our members work together to improve equity in our region when it comes to our transportation system. Next slide, please. So we are all working together towards climate resiliency, an incredibly important goal. And with your endorsement of the 2030 Climate and Energy Action Plan targets that were presented last month, we have also updated our questions that are in response to protecting and enhancing the natural environment. We do respond to the natural environment in many different ways through our analysis, but with these 2 questions, we wanted to focus specifically on the climate. So one better addresses the ozone levels to ask if how a project, or if the project is expected to contribute to reductions in emissions of criteria pollutants, specifically to attainment of those ozone levels consistent with the national ambient air quality standards. And the other is to whether or not it helps us reach that greenhouse gas reduction goal that is part of the Climate Action Plan. Next slide, please. So what is your role? So we ask you to review this document so that when we come back to you next month, that we can ask for your approval and kick off our plan and with a call for projects. If you have any comments or questions, I do ask you to contact myself or whomever you prefer to direct your questions at the board. But we do certainly welcome your feedback approximately over the next couple of weeks. And in an ongoing manner, you are our elected officials, you are our decision makers, you have budgets at your control, and we encourage you to continue to work with your staff to encourage those plans and policies, those programs that do implement our aspirational initiatives, because this is how it's done, right? We don't do project selection at the TPB due to our 3-state nature. We don't tell you exactly what types of projects to submit, but we work together to set those priorities and then to work together to submit projects that address those. So with this, I conclude my remarks and welcome any questions. Chair Russell, if you would like to.
Thank you, Stacy. That's a great presentation. This is really exciting stuff. I do want to just suggest folks, if they have questions, to email them in, because we do have a guest speaker for our next item, and I want to make sure we get to that. So boy, we just never have enough time. But thank you so much. So
thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm going to move on to invite Jennifer Mitchell now, the Director of Virginia's Department of Rail and Public Transportation, to share with us the recent significant actions the Commonwealth has taken to advance intercity freight and commuter rail systems and the promise it holds for this region. So, Ms. Mitchell, I apologize for us running late. The floor is yours.
No problem at all, and thank you very much for having me. Really looking forward to being able to present our information about what we're doing with our Transforming Rail in Virginia initiative and how that relates as well to the new Long Bridge. And I wish I could see you all in person and that we had the opportunity to do this in person, but hopefully we'll get a chance to do that again soon. So next slide. So first of all, a little bit about Virginia and where we are in the East Coast Rail Network. As you can see, a number of significant rail lines that serve the Port of New York and markets in the Midwest currently run right through the heart of Virginia, as well as our Port of Virginia in Hampton Roads, which is a major economic driver for the Commonwealth. Serves a lot of traffic that goes east and west to the Midwest as well. So Virginia truly is really at the crossroads of the Mid-Eastern rail network, along with DC and Maryland as well. So next slide. A little bit about the passenger rail network in Virginia. As you can see in the line on the right, which is what we call the RF&P corridor, that's the corridor that runs from Washington, DC down to Richmond and to Hampton Roads and then to points in North Carolina. That's where we have the majority of our Amtrak service today, including our state-supported services that originate in Newport News, Norfolk, Richmond, and then in the western part of the state, we have service that originates in Roanoke that goes through Lynchburg and Manassas as well. That's actually one of the most profitable lines in Amtrak's entire state-supported network. What I'd like to point out, though, about all of this is that there is, all of those lines converge up in Northern Virginia and then go over the Long Bridge, which is, as of right now, one of the biggest bottlenecks that we have on rail on the entire East Coast. So next slide. You're all very familiar with the I-95 corridor, which serves all of us, Maryland, DC, and Virginia. In Virginia, it is one of the most congested portions of the entire U.S. highway system. We are very much about promoting multimodal solutions to this. I guess about a year and a half ago, we had VDOT conduct a study to see what it would cost to add one new lane to I-95 between the Beltway south to Thornburg, Virginia. And VDOT estimated that it would cost about $12.6 billion to add that one lane. But most importantly, that actually would not do anything to solve the congestion problem. As soon as that lane would be finished with construction, it would be just as congested during the peak period as it is today. They then looked at 2 lanes and 3 lanes, and they didn't even really see modest improvements in congestion levels until you had 3 lanes, which obviously is not financially or cost effective, and also would have significant impacts on communities across the Commonwealth too. So we are looking at multimodal solutions such as passenger rail to help alleviate congestion. Next slide. So on December 19th, our Governor Ralph Northam announced with the CEO of CSX that we had reached a new landmark agreement with CSX in which the total value is about $3.7 billion. And I should mention as well, this is just the beginning of our process here, this announcement. We're still working on our definitive agreements. This was also, we were joined by Amtrak, who has pledged to support this program with $944 million, which is about 25% of the entire program. And this new program is going to be implemented by a new Virginia Passenger Rail Authority. So next slide. So a little bit about that. This is really a very transformational change for how passenger rail is implemented in Virginia. Today, all of our state-supported trains run on either CSX or Norfolk Southern tracks, our two Class 1 railroads in the state, much like Maryland as well. And so we are now going to own railroad right-of-way between Richmond and DC, and we're also requiring a line that runs east-west between Doswell, Virginia, and Clifton Forge, Virginia. And that's something called the Buckingham Branch. We're purchasing that to preserve it for future rail use and acquiring a new abandoned line from Petersburg south into North Carolina. But most importantly, today when we want to expand passenger rail anywhere in, and this goes for our VRE commuter rail service as well, we have to negotiate on a route-by-route basis with the networks in order to get permission to add service. So once we're able to build out our own track, we'll be able to also control our destiny in adding more VRE commuter service or Amtrak passenger service across the state. So next slide, please. A little bit more about this entire initiative. We will be acquiring 350 miles of right-of-way and about 225 miles of track across the state. We have committing to a $3.2 billion infrastructure investment as well. The centerpiece of that is the Long Bridge project. Many of you are probably familiar with that bridge as it goes between DC and Virginia. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. We'll also be building out a fourth track to serve that bridge from the banks of the Potomac River south into Alexandria, and then a third track from Franconia south to the Occoquan River, which will then build out a fully separated 3-track and 4-track network leading up to the new Long Bridge, as well as some additional sidings south of that. What we realized when we were doing rail planning for the Long Bridge, that it didn't make sense to expand the bridge itself without having those infrastructure investments made to the south. The whole entire system doesn't work. You would just be expanding capacity, but not able to get service up to that bridge in order to utilize that capacity. Likewise, it didn't make sense to make any investments south of the bridge without having that bottleneck improved. And so really all of these investments are necessary in order to make the entire rail network work leading up into the Long Bridge. A lot of this, though, is about service. We're not building a bridge just to build a bridge or acquiring right-of-way just to acquire right-of-way. For us, it's all about service. We'll be doubling our state-supported Amtrak service between Washington and D.C. and Richmond by 2030. And then we'll also be improving VRE service between Fredericksburg and D.C. by about 75%. So very, very significant service increases that we'll be able to achieve as part of this deal. And also more importantly is service performance. This is very much about improving reliability and being able to improve reliability of passenger, commuter, and freight trains in this very congested mixed corridor. So next slide, please. We are also setting up a new Virginia Passenger Rail Authority to implement this program. So as we were working through governance issues with our partners at DC DOT, and I would be remiss if I didn't thank them for all the work that they've done in carrying forward the environmental study for Long Bridge, and we really appreciate the partnership we have with them. We started looking at governance issues for constructing this new bi-state bridge and also investing in infrastructure south of there. What we came up with was a new authority that was modeled very much after the Virginia Port Authority in Hampton Roads that would be able to lead the design and construction for this project, enter into agreements with Amtrak and VRE for operating, be a direct recipient for US DOT grants, and also have eminent domain powers for expanding and operating passenger rail. So the new Passenger Rail Authority is going to have a separate board appointed by the governor. We just had our first board meeting on October 26th. They're going to actually own all of the new assets and right-of-way, including the new Long Bridge that we'll be constructing. And they will not be operating service directly, but they will be entering into agreements with others to do that as well. So next slide. So what does this all mean to the DC region? First of all, this piece of infrastructure is extremely important because it literally is the connection between the Northeast Corridor and the Southeast Corridor. While the bridge itself is in DC, as I mentioned before, a lot of the infrastructure that's required to actually make the bridge function is in Virginia. But this opens up a lot of new opportunities. In the Mark Cornerstone study that COG completed back in June, I believe, they studied and identified new markets that could be accomplished through additional run-through service. And that service, if we were able to expand Mark's service into Virginia and likewise be able to expand VRE service into Maryland, that would really be a game changer for the entire DC region. COG estimated that by 2040, we could have up to 17,500 weekday trips. That would have significant impacts for traffic congestion. It would open up housing opportunities and improve the jobs housing balance in the DC region, provide some more redundancy to the metro system, and have an overall more resilient transportation network. In addition to the bridge itself, there is a proposal to build a new biped bridge between Virginia and Washington as well, which the Greater Washington Partnership estimates could open up about another 22% or about 1,300 biped trips a day between DC and Virginia, and provide a much more convenient connection between DC and Crystal City as well. This would improve opportunities to access affordable housing to the nation's core and be able to improve commuting opportunities overall. Next slide, please. So as far as the economic benefits of improving the Long Bridge itself, expanding the Long Bridge would result in about $6 billion of a contribution annually to the DC region by 2040 from rail commuters. It's very, very significant opportunity. While there would be construction benefits throughout the project and outlays related to operations and maintenance as well, having that improved connectivity improves traffic congestion, reduces commuting delays. It also opens up opportunities for more commuters to access job opportunities throughout Northern Virginia, DC, and Maryland, and results in significant time savings as well. Next slide. So, as I mentioned before, our new service plan that we've committed to with CSX will be an additional 6 round trips that will connect the Northeast Corridor down to Richmond and other points in Virginia. Those will actually be implemented in stages as we build out infrastructure, with the first one being available in 2021 after we execute our deal with CSX and Amtrak. Next slide. And for VRE service, we would have an additional 4 VRE trains on the Fredericksburg line, and also another 3 VRE trains on the Manassas line, which also directly parallels I-66, another very important commuter corridor in Northern Virginia as well. And I should note that those Manassas line trains are also subject to negotiations with Norfolk Southern, which owns some of those lines, but with the deal with CSX would open up those slots to, for new Manassas line trains to then go over the Long Bridge into DC. And I should note as well that the new service that we've committed to with CSX, with the new trains that we would be able to provide late night service into DC and out back into Virginia, as well as new weekend service as well. Again, very game changing for VRE commuter rail in Virginia. Next slide. So a little bit more about the Long Bridge itself. So the Long Bridge is an existing 2-track structure that connects DC just north of Crystal City into East Potomac Part and then into Washington, DC, serving Union Station. The entire corridor itself is about 1.5 miles. The big structure that everybody is most familiar with is just to the south of the existing 14th Street Bridge and the Metro Rail Bridge. If you're coming over the bridge from Virginia into DC and look off to your right, see a rusty railroad bridge, that is the Long Bridge. But this, as recommended in the study, we would be building a new 2-track bridge just north of the existing bridge. The existing bridge would stay in CSX ownership, and then the Commonwealth and the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority would own the new structure, which would be dedicated just to passenger rail, both commuter trains and Amtrak trains, making this a fully separated network to separate out freight and passenger and really reduce delays that we see today in the DC area. I should note as well, though, there are 5 other structures that are part of this project spanning over the GW Parkway, 395, and going under Maryland Avenue as well. So it's definitely a very complex construction project. DC led this project through the environmental status, or through the record of decision, which was just received in September. Right now, the bridge is about 98% capacity during peak hours. So really, we don't have the opportunity to expand any more passenger service until the bridge is expanded. But most importantly, we had to have a deal with CSX in order to make this happen, because CSX owns the right-of-way on either side. And so being able to reach a public-private partnership with them was extremely important in being able to move this project forward. So next slide, please. This is just a schematic of the alternative that was chosen. Again, it's a new 2-track structure just upstream of the existing structure, with a new 4th track in Arlington, and then also new 4th tracks on the DC side. So now we'll have all of the freight trains crossing the bridge on the southern structure, and then being able to go south into Virginia Avenue Tunnel. And then the new passenger trains will stay on the north side of the tracks, be able to serve L'Enfant Plaza, and then go north into Union Station. Next slide, please. As part of that as well, we in DC, we're working with the National Park Service very closely throughout this entire environmental study. And as part of that, what was identified as a potential mitigation measure for the impacts on parkland, both of the GW Parkway and East Potomac Park in DC, was the opportunity to improve regional mobility by constructing a new bicycle and pedestrian bridge just north of the existing bridge. This is going to significantly reduce travel time for bike commuters between DC. It will allow access directly into Longbridge Park, which is just north of Crystal City. It'll cut down travel times for bike commuters into the city significantly, and also for those coming into Virginia as well. Next slide. And again, this is just another schematic of the Long Bridge, how it connects into VRE's Crystal City and Alexandria stations and into L'Enfant Plaza as well. So next slide. So the corridor itself, as I mentioned, is a very complex corridor of multiple infrastructure investments. The Long Bridge is estimated to be about $1.9 billion in construction. The 4th track that we would be building in between Alexandria up to the Long Bridge approach would be about $185 million. We received a federal fast lane grant for a couple of years ago of $45 million to help support that. And then, as I mentioned before, we'd be going into a new 3rd track south of Alexandria. Next slide. So our current status is we did receive the ROD for Long Bridge in September. We are continuing to negotiate our definitive agreements with CSX, Amtrak, and VRE, who's also contributing over $200 million towards this project as well. I should say we are weeks away from still completing those negotiations. We still have terms that we're working on, but appreciate the partnership we have with all of our private and public partners in making this happen. All of these agreements are then going to be assigned over to the new Virginia Passenger Rail Authority early in 2021. Next slide. So future steps, we'll be finalizing our agreements, continuing to mobilize the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority. We'll be hiring an executive director, bringing on staff, and mobilizing that all of the administrative apparatus of that agency over the next year. We're continuing to work with our local jurisdictions, DC, Maryland as well, on potentially securing other funding partnerships to help construct Long Bridge and other aspects of the project as well. And we are continuing to advance engineering. We are in a procurement right now for preliminary engineering on Long Bridge, which we expect to begin in January too. And I believe that is the conclusion of my presentation. I am happy to take any questions.
Mitchell, thank you so much for a great presentation, and I appreciate your patience with us and running a little bit over. So I will just ask if there are any burning questions for Ms. Mitchell. All right. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, everybody, for your patience today. If you do have questions, you know where to email them. And with that, our next meeting is scheduled for December 16th, 2020. I would like to wish you all a very safe, healthy, and happy Thanksgiving holiday. Please be safe and take care. Thank you. Bye all.
Thank you, everyone.